Companies around the world are trying to get surface their own brand into AI recommendation systems. In this presentation, we're going to look at how AI models work, how they are compiling the information, and what measures can you do right now for your own brand and marketing team in order to get more recommendations, more citations, and more AI awareness from a user perspective. Also, I will introduce you the do's and don'ts on what it means to be surfaced by AI, because there's a lot of myth around it, and we need to be clear. AI mentions is not straightforward, and it's also not homogeneous across different LLM models. It might differ by context windows, user-specific requirements, and other features. But there's actual some points that it can be controlled by the brand itself. For example, improving their operations, for example, being more data-driven, and also showing and communicating those data points clearly in an attribute and specification format. I will be talking about all of that in the coming presentation. There is a new discovery layer. AI chatbots, assistants, and platforms are becoming the new front doors for brand discovery and conversion. Before a user visits a website or runs a search, they ask an AI, and the AI will decide which brands are worth mentioning. We need to understand this new funnel in order to know where brands can play a role in it and also influence the results that are LLMs surfacing into the output. The first one is the user query. Now, users are asking a question or describing a simple or complex problem or situation or context specifically relevant to them. The query replaces the traditional search bar as a starting point for discovery. An AI system will try to match the user intent as much as possible, will try to be useful in order to respond to the actual user query, matching the intent, and it will retrieve information stored from its own model or combined with web search or other tools that is available to that AI systems, and based on measurable attributes, clarity, relevance, and independent evidence, it will form its own recommendations, which is the third step. The brands that the AI can clearly understand and attribute to the problem are surfaced, and others will remain underrepresented, regardless of the awareness. So what is brand interpretability? I call it BI. And this is a very specific concept and very important to understand in order to be successful in this new AI era. Interpretability is the connection between the user situation and the brand measurable attributes. For example, which fast food provides the healthiest food? Here we need to think about the definition of healthy. Is it having high fiber content? Is it high protein content? Is it low carbs content? There's many definitions of healthy food. But if your brand has specific information on how much, let's say, food nutrition components and vitamins and everything else your food provides to the users, AI models will be able to retrieve that information because that's a measurable attribute. Another simpler question: what's the best airline for reduced mobility users? This kind of question might be answered through different forms, but an AI system, in generally speaking, it will retrieve the airline policy. So make sure that if you're an airline, you want to have a clear wheelchair or reduced mobility policy. But also now sometimes it's not as simple as that. Also Reddit, user reviews, and other independent verifiable sources will check and will also issue their own recommendation on whether this airline is actually doing what it says on its own page. That will also be fed into the LLM answer. But there's also an important nuance. Some advanced LLM models, like the latest from Claude, for example, they can understand that maybe airlines are not the main entities that influence whether it's a, let's say, it's a good place or it's a good service for reduced mobility users or not, because they may understand that maybe airlines have a limited amount of power in order to influence that, but it's more about the airport infrastructure itself. So then the shift will be from the brand into the airport location. So you see there, it's not always a straight answer. Also, depending on the LLM models that you're dealing with. Users might also have different queries that, depending on their own context, their own personal situation, will issue different recommendations. A user that has a request for the cheapest flight from Barcelona to Paris or from Paris to Barcelona will get a different recommendation that a user that says, I am really environmentally conscious, I want to reduce my own CO2 emissions, and I also don't have a big budget. So then you start getting into constraints and specific situations for every specific user or end persona that you can think of. In order to succeed, however, brands need to understand how each claim is measured in the industry so that they can be surfaced by AI citations, and also get your brand named in the response, because AI citation is a very nice way of saying, I use this information, but if AI response does not use your name, that will not really matter as much. And that's very important to understand. Here we have a real example. There's a question, what's the best airline for arriving on time in Europe? So how the AI system will understand this question and will issue its own recommendation. First, it will look at the user situation. The traveler wants to reduce the risk of delays in Europe. Then AI will translate the need. Arriving on time equals flight arrives within 15 minutes of schedule. The third step is AI finding the evidence. It will get independent sources. It will get tools, Google Flights, whatever articles, press releases, many different sources, including the own airline content, to see, is this content like if I cross-check this content, is it all saying the same thing, yes or no? Is it consistent, yes or no? So consistency across all platforms and independent reviews is extremely important during AI mentioning and AI visibility. And then it will issue a recommendation. In this case, Iberia Express appears first with 88.94% on-time arrivals for this year. So that's how you need to think in this new era. You need to think in terms of attributes and data points. What's the attribute? Timeliness. What's the data point? 80% or 90% of my flights arrive within schedule. Is it verified through an independent source? Yes or no? If yes, then you move to the next ranking level through on the AI lens. And this is very important to understand, because the problem with traditional branding is that it was focused on emotional positioning, broad storytelling, trying to make vague claims. I am the best airline. I am the airline with the most comfortable seats. Can you prove that through your own attributes? Do you have the best materials? Which materials are you using for your seats? How big are your seats in terms of centimeters or inches? How wide are they? Have you measured them? Has an independent party checked that this is true? What are people on Reddit, on user reviews, on Trustpilot saying about that? Is it actually matching what you're saying on your own page? Traditional branding normally fails at AI interpretation entirely, and that has been written by a very good article by John Gale, Lucas Yan, and Luke Watio by the Harvard Business Review. Because AI systems need specificity and structure to connect a brand to a user query. Every time you make a generic and broad claim, AI is gonna basically ignore it. You can say whatever you want, and if you don't have data to prove it or statistics or ways to measure that, for AI is going to be a weaker source of evidence. And the truth is that no service can actually guarantee full AI visibility, because AI visibility is fragmented. And the reason why it's fragmented is because not all the models weight the same sources the same way, and not all the models see the issues the same way, and the information, they don't weight the same parameters the same way. So every LLM model, every AI system is customized, it's different, and it's complex. You may ask the same query twice, you will get very different responses. That's why it's called generative, because it just generates, and there's a component of unpredictability in here. So AI systems and models do not surface the same brands across user prompts and queries. In fact, a study done by these authors showed that only 8.4% in some studies showed the same consistent branding and the same consistent recommendation. And we should, again, focus on being included in the answer, not only being cited, because being cited is nice. Of course, it's better than not being cited, but it's not enough to generate trust. So here there is an AI visibility framework that I would like to introduce. AI recommends brands that it can clearly understand. The framework maps on how a user problem connects through requirements and attributes to evidence, and finally to your brand as the answer. So when you're doing this exercise of trying to be surfaced in AI answers, you should start documenting and seeing all the user questions, all the user problems, all the customer pain points. This exercise is very old exercise since the very beginning of marketing, but now it's most crucial than ever, because being successful in new technology does not mean you need to do very different things. You just need to understand how the technology works behind the scenes and translate that into useful content for the technology. And that usually requires a deep understanding of your customers. This is the old century lesson for marketing. Once you list those problems, test your own product against your own LLMs. See what they're saying, see what they're recommending. Are your products or brands being recommended by those LLMs? Yes or no? If not, then there is a gap that you need to close. Is your product being consistent? Do you have your product names and attributes? Are they being surfaced the same way in a consistent way across all platforms? And is it verified and measured with data and independent audits? Yes or no? If the answer is no, you need to work on that game, and that's a long game. It's not a short-term game. You need to make sure that understanding how all this data graph is being fed into your products, fed into your brand, and see how it will be surfacing and recommending your own brands within months of hard work or even weeks. You need to make sure also that you know which data and evidence is AI pulling from, and the sources also matter. The more reliable and professional sources will weight more into the answer than weaker sources or just vague claims by people that never really experienced that product either. Then, if you work on that area, you will get your brands recommended into the user query for that specific context. Another area that is important to know is that AI recommend what it can interpret. AI systems connect user queries to brands that they clearly understand. They clear your brand attribute and evidence, including when your brand is good at and when you don't recommend using it and you recommend maybe a competitor. That's also going to, understanding that will also help you for your business strategy, because users have very complex constraints and situations in life, and AI acts as their personalized filter or assistant that exactly pulls information that matches all those constraints. Not always perfect, of course, because they make a lot of mistakes, but every time the capabilities are getting higher and higher. So if you look at this example here on the screen, we see that the user wants to buy a flight that is cheap. They need to get a vegan meal, plus they are environmentally conscious. These are three constraints, and we don't know the other constraints. Maybe in the past conversation, through its own context memory, it was talking about other stuff as well. So, but just understanding these three constraints, an LLM will understand that they need to check all these kind of sources, cross-reference them, and then come up with a conclusion. The answers were basically it was recommended the airline SAS because of this, and these reasons. But the most interesting part is not the actual reasons, it's the sources it used in order to surface its own recommendation. It used Reddit, it used databases, it used Google Flights. So it will call third-party APIs, it will call third-party sources in order to issue its own recommendations. However, as I was saying, the same prompt can have a very different recommendation depending on the AI model. Claude will recommend actually Norwegian airline instead of SAS. And in this Claude model, it's actually pretty advanced because it found out that SAS airline does not provide meals on short haul flights. And that's an observation that ChatGPT completely missed. So you can see that recommendations will not always be accurate. However, the brand and the position and the actual information, it's crucial than ever. How did it recommend why Norwegian? And there was actually a press release by the own airline company surfacing how it has newer models that pollute less. And then Claude was able to relate newer model, less emissions, user wants environmentally friendly, boom, that's a connection that they made. And that was also extra points for that recommended brand. Do you have, can you do pre-booked vegan meals even though it's a short flight? Yes, they found out explicitly you can order your meals through Norwegian airline, and this is the cost. You see, so everything that it was trying to pull information from, whether it's accurate or not, whether the airline ends up doing or not, it will still pull it out from the sources and cross-check that if possible with independent reviews or with user experiences. So the conclusion is, don't let yourself think that AI visibility is just one effort or one direction. Because AI visibility, it's a whole complex thing to understand. But it doesn't mean it's not actionable. In fact, it's very actionable, and brands have more control than ever on how to be surfaced. The question is, do you know for which kind of situations you want your brand to help the user, yes or no? And if not, you have that gap to close. AI must translate user needs. So you need to understand what your product could bring and which specific human needs does it cover, and why is your brand better than the other on all specific scenarios where you want your brand to appear and serve to the customer. Traditional SEO is still the foundation for getting surfaced, not only being cited. So all this myth that SEO doesn't matter, it's not true. You still need to do your hard work on creating the content, surfacing it. The only difference is that now you need to be more technical in how you specify your product specifications, how you prove that, and ask for more testimonials, because independent sources, they play a big role in confirming the LLM that this is a trustworthy source, because sources needs to be trustworthy for the LLM to be fed into and to be prioritized. And there's one key takeaway from here. Always start from the human situation. Then think how the AI translate that. It will translate it into definitions. How can I measure that? Because that's what machines do. They measure things and they take actions based on the measurements, based on the math behind them. It will issue a whole world universe of brand candidates and then narrow it down to the specific situation of the user. Okay, so that's very important in a framework. So that's it for today. If you need to get AI visibility action report for your website, do not hesitate to get into my website and contact me if you need, of course, help with your own website performance challenges, you experience weak SEO, or you want to increase your AI visibility. I can help you with that. I can create content, also help you with your strategy. Google is not indexing my pages. That's also something that I've worked with, and many other topics related to creating traffic for your site. If you also deal with multi-language or multi-product, setting up challenges, how do you deal with markets that speak the same language, but they use different words? How can I make my product name consistent? These kind of questions. I'm happy to help you on either a project basis or a one-on-one consulting. Thank you very much and have a great day.